أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I begin with the name of God, the most gracious, the most merciful. Praises are due to him and salutations unto our beloved Prophet Muhammad. May the peace and blessings of God be with him. Welcome to another edition of our Ramadan podcast. And we want to commence today's episode by saying that we have just concluded the Black History Month. And during the Black History Month, we pause not only to remember history, but also to honor legacy, resilience, scholarship, and spiritual courage. Today, we explore a powerful and necessary conversation, the contribution of African American Muslims to Islam, not only in America, but also globally. And it is my great pleasure and honor to have this discussion with us, a friend and a brother and an intellectual, Dr. Jamel Coy Hudson. He is a lecturer and professor of rhetoric and also an Imam, and our beloved brother and doctor is an Imam, a traditional Muslim Imam that I'm honored to have him here today. You will hear more from him, but I want to say Assalamu alaikum to you, brother. Assalamu alaikum, and thank you so much. Ramadan Mubarak to you and your family. And I am so delighted that despite of your busy schedule, we have been trying to have this discussion a while, but despite of your busy schedule, you are here today to spend the evening with me and also to have some sohbah as well at the same time. Thank you, Sheikh. I'm so grateful for you to join us and welcome. So I'll say that many people think that Islam actually arrived in America recently, but history tells us something deeper. Can you help us understand that Islam was present here way before our contemporary time?
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمد عبده ورسوله. Sheikh, I thank you so much for having me. It is an honor to be here and to be on this podcast with your listeners. And I want to get right into the question you asked and respond by saying Black history, it's Muslim history, it's American history, it's world history. And as an Afro-American Muslim, I find it important to, as you stated, address many misnomers, many narratives that have been presented that make people believe Islam is foreign to America. And I would retort and say Islam is as American as apple pie.
Wow.
Islam has been here when the enslaved African was brought from the shores of from Africa in the transatlantic slave trade. Scholars are pointing now more and more to almost 30 to 40% of those enslaved human beings being Muslim with Tawheed on their lips. And there is so much evidence that through fugitive means, enslaved Africans kept their capacity. Here we are, Sheikh, we're in Ramadan.
Yes.
And the first Ramadans that were observed in these western shores of the United States were by enslaved Africans, while on the plantation, through fugitive means, with very little, still breaking their fast, still giving zakat, still calling the adhan. So that legacy, that tradition is something that's very near and dear to me. And over the course of our conversation today, I want to speak about that element and distinctness of Blackness in Islam that's not solely found in the diaspora of being in the Western Hemisphere, but the idea of Blackness and African identity being very much surrounded and immersed in Islam and its life in the time of the Prophet, peace be upon him, his Sahaba. Like there's so many examples of his Ayman and the women who cared for him. So there's so many different rich examples that, and one more thing, Sheikh, as we begin this, we understand that in Islam there's one and our unity and the Tawheed and bliss of Iman. But the Quran does say that he's made us nations and tribes to get to know each other, right? And then the criterion is the God consciousness and the good deeds and the tawakkul. So I stand here as your brother, an Afro-American, grounded in my culture, not feeling inferior nor superior, but just bearing witness to the history and bringing it forth so that everyone can know this. It's like hidden in plain sight, but we now get a chance to, on this podcast, uncover it and have the conversation. So I'm excited.
So great that you say that, because as you know, and I'll say that to our viewers and listeners, that I had the distinct blessing to visit Senegal and Gambia twice. Going to a place that is called Gore, where they have this location where they will assemble the slaves and they ship them off, and they have the door of no returns. And I speak with many people there, and they were telling us that some of these slaves that were there, that they were shipping off to various parts of the world, among them was America, that basically they had the kalima la ilaha illallah on the tip of their tongues. And listen to these stories, narrations. It literally place you into that mode, very emotional to know the struggles that our brothers and sisters endure to bring Islam to this part of the world. And we cannot have their story forgotten.
No, sir.
But we have to continue to speak, and that is one of the reasons I'm so connected with the um, my African brothers and sisters in Africa.
Yes.
I have my closest friend is from Senegal, and that's just something I want to say. You're the imam basically for one of the mosque here in New York that has a lot of history, and I think that stands as a testimony basically to the presence of Islam here. Can you speak about your community and then maybe a little bit about the history, but the mere fact there's a structure
There is
there.
a legacy, an
Legacy,
inheritance.
yes.
So the Islamic center that I serve as the resident imam at is the Siraatal Mustaqeem Islamic Center. It's located in Wyandanch, New York. Interestingly enough, on a street that's called the Straight Path. And that is the actual legal terminology for the street on your Google Maps. And that path was a path that many indigenous Native Americans walked, and it's called the Straight Path. And that is, again, the guidance we pray to be on. And the building that we're in, it was originally a barbershop. Well, it was originally a home, a house. Oh, there's such a history here. I have to go back. The Islamic Center is located in Wyandanch. Wyandanch is a historically underserved African American community. When African Americans were being terrorized and marginalized in the South, many migrated their way up to the North during what's called the Great Migration. And when they made their way to the North in northern cities, many white Americans left in what sociologists refer to as white flight and made their way to Long Island. Well, a lot of African Americans followed suit, but were steered into ghettos, steered into underserved communities like a Wyandanch or a Brentwood, where the only distinction is a train track. You cross a train track, you're in a whole different community, but it's the same, but those intentional lines of demarcation. So Wyandanch, predominantly Black, underserved, and it's in this community that through the apparatus known as the Nation of Islam, and I want to spend a lot of time unpacking that social reformation entity, what it did to give Black people who were historically told you're nothing, you're nobody. You have with its Akida not being Tawheed. We know this now, but at the time, it gave Black people a way of saying, I'm somebody, taking on Islamic names, beginning to return to their African identity before slavery removed that from us. And it was under that mindset, members who were of the Nation of Islam, and the mindset that Mr. Muhammad had for doing for self, they established a barbershop. So members of the Nation of Islam had a barbershop, and they were serving people, doing for self. And in fact, it was in 1963, Malcolm X visited Wyandanch, the community that we're in, and he spoke about Islam being in Wyandanch. And at that time, he was still in the Nation of Islam, but I believe that's the qadr of Allah that is a part of the journey that eventually, 1975, when Elijah Muhammad, who was leading the nation, passed away, his son, Imam Waraddin Muhammad, immediately, overnight, some historians say, and some scholars say almost 1 million Muslims overnight immediately said their shahada and moved from the shirk of a man being God to immediately Quran and Sunnah. It's a miracle. It should be further examined. What the African American Islamic tradition has produced is really a sign, light upon light. So as of today, since 1979, the masjid that could is based on Quran and Sunnah. We look at the schools of thought, the fiqh, the jurisprudence, but we certainly are grounded in Islam. And there's no refuting that, no disputing that we are Muslims with the kalima on our tongue. And we're working, feasibilillah, to give classes to our youth, to teach and edify. We have a community, a relationship with the local school district in Wyandanch. So we have the young people who, this is something I'm passionate about, Sheikh. I had a season of life where I wrestled. I wrestled, and wrestling is a prophetic sunnah. There's a beautiful hadith that speaks about the Prophet, peace upon him, wrestling Wakana. So we have actual athletics for our young people and outlet for them to channel their energy at our center. So we're really trying with this new cohort and generation to bridge the past, the pioneers, those who've been holding down the fort. Because there's been a historic precedent, Sheikh, where a lot of the African-American masjids, they're attended by the elders, they're pioneers, they're holding it down. They've been on that post for 40 years, 30 years. We need some new young Lead a vibrant
And
leadership to
I think,
come.
frankly speaking, I think that issue is not only within the African American
Mhm.
Muslim community,
It might just
but
be,
it's
in
there
our
in many of
general no.
the communities. Allow me to continue by
Mhm.
saying that, like, as African Americans search for their identity post slavery, religious movements, like as you said, it emerged. I can remember figures like the Noble Drew Ali
Yes, sir, in
and
the
later
Moorish
Elijah,
Science Temple,
yeah,
yeah.
and also later Elijah Muhammad. And while their Aqidah was not aligned to the Sunni tradition, I want to say that we must understand them in context. When people have been systematically dehumanized,
Right.
right? When people were, the theology becomes like a therapy.
Mm,
Their theology becomes like a therapy. They
right,
hold on to their faith as a source of strength. So their faith, I think, this movement restored pride.
right. When you have a society that has a white Jesus, a white figure, and white is good,
Yeah,
and if white is God, then what am I? Am I black skin? Am I the
yeah,
devil? Am I evil? So
yeah,
those organizations that you mentioned, the UNIA, the Universal Negro Improvement Association,
yes,
Marcus Mosiah
yeah.
Garvey. Listen to this. Marcus Mosiah Garvey had a theme that said, one God, one aim, one destiny. When I hear one God, I go, Allahu Akbar. They may not even realize, but the seeds of Tawheed are being planted so that one day we were fortunate to have under the leadership of Imam Muhammad, the Shahada came, Quran and Sunnah, and
Yeah.
we're going forward.
So we can simply say, like, so religion became like a resistance during that time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Can you speak a
Absolutely.
little bit to that?
There
Like
has
with
been a historic, subhanAllah, there has been a historic uh, tradition of Black prophetic, Black liberation theology and fire that comes even in the Christian cloth of the Black experience. So you look at, for instance, I was just traveling recently in Philadelphia when the white parishioners would not let Black people inside their churches.
yeah,
Richard Allen founded the African Methodist Episcopal Church to do for self and not
yeah.
be, because what I don't want to be in any religion that makes me feel that I'm not valued because of my race or my being.
You're
So,
inferior
and I'm
somehow.
inferior. But and then in Christian language, there's something called the Hamitic curse, the curse of Ham, that because of allegedly Noah's drunkenness, the descendants of Ham would be forced to be slaves. And allegedly, Black people are the descendants of Ham. So there was theological support for slavery. It was
Yeah,
constitutionally, theologically supported. So when you have this resistance of saying, no, 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 what the nation did, the Nation of Islam is funny. The Nation of Islam said, well, not only is the white man not God, the white man's the devil.
yeah.
We're going to flip it on his
Uh,
head. But when you think about that survival tactic, what do you say when you see Black people being lynched? That's a devilish thing for someone
yeah,
to do that. What do you say when you're being marginalized? Your Black children can't walk the streets without being spit on and marginalized.
yeah,
That's a devilish thing. So in the maturation, we realize that no human being should be called devil,
yeah,
but we certainly don't want to act like devils.
yeah.
And we certainly don't want to be used by Shaitan to do
Devilish. We
what
said devilish traits.
devilish
Like
straight.
traits. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So we
That's
don't
we said.
cast the guys and say because your skin is
Yeah.
white, you're bad. We don't say you're bad or good. That's a part
But
of the
Sheikh, it's
evolution.
important for us to have this discussion here too,
Mhm.
because we want to make sure, as we're discussing this, because a lot of people, when they think about the contribution of African American towards Islam and their Islam, the
Mhm.
first thing that comes to their mind is Elijah Muhammad
Yeah.
and those type of
Yeah.
language,
Yeah.
and they want to paint us. But our faith, just to say that our faith says, لا فرق بين عربي ولا
Mm.
عجمي ولا أبيض ولا أسود إلا بالتقوى. That there
Taqwa.
is no difference between an Arab and a non-Arab,
Right.
black or someone that is not.
Nabi
Yeah,
said that in his
it's in
farewell
yeah,
sermon.
sermon.
Subhanallah.
Yes,
Yeah. And his sunnah. Yeah.
except with taqwa.
Taqwa.
So we don't look at complexion,
MashaAllah.
complexion. We don't look and deal with people based on complexion.
We don't do
You know,
colorism. We don't do
yeah,
racism or tribalism. And you definitely are correct in people willing to solely look at Elijah Muhammad, Mr.
Muhammad.
Muhammad. And then people are really quick to lift up Malcolm. They want to lift up Malcolm, El Hajj Malik El
Yeah,
Shabazz. Well, if you want to really appreciate him, you have to know that when he was in prison, when
yeah,
he was in Massachusetts penal system, it was the Nation of Islam that found him and cleaned him up and
yeah.
presented him to the world. So you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. If you're going to accept Malcolm, you have to
That
accept
was a
all
part
of
of
his
his
story.
journey.
It's
That was a
part of
part
his,
of
and
the
that's a
divine
part of the
plan.
African American
In
Islamic
this
journey. All
journey.
of that has to be.
Yeah,
You can't just pick
yeah,
it.
and
Muhammad Ali, another name we'll talk about. Cassius Clay,
yeah.
another person that the nation gave a sense of pride in being
And
Black.
it's important that we understand that
Yes, sir.
religion became a resistance, and yes, it became a moral resistance
Mm-hmm.
and a psychological liberation
Mm-hmm.
during that particular time. And I'll say that we cannot discuss Black history without talking about Malcolm X.
Subhanallah.
How can our Muslims learn from his struggle and his path You know, as you know, when he went to Saudi Arabia for
Yeah.
Umrah, how the transformation, but his journey itself and
Yeah, I think it's
his
important
symbolism.
we
So
take him
maybe
in his wholeness.
wholeness, yeah,
Born May 19th, 1925 in Omaha, Nebraska, martyred February 21st, 1965, 39 years old, a young man. We have to, in its totality, see his maturation. Born, his mother, may Allah, forgive her sins. She strived and did the best she could, but she had mental health struggles because her husband was killed. So you have a woman
yeah,
raising multiple children, struggling. So he's grown up in the streets, finding activities, illicit behavior, and eventually, and this is an important thing to know. And sir, I teach. I'm in education. They famously is mentioned in his autobiography, had an educator, a teacher, tell him, when he shared he wanted to be president of his class or aspire for being a lawyer, excuse me. His teacher said, don't be a lawyer.
mm,
No one's going to hire a Negro lawyer, right? Be a
oh,
carpenter. Jesus was a carpenter. And try to use again that religious theological kind of
oh my
justification
God,
for your subservient
oh
behavior.
my God,
So Malcolm rejected that, went into the streets, found his way. And I don't even like to spend too much time there. A lot of time is glorifying his days as a person in darkness. But while in prison, again, the Nation of Islam came. And even in the Nation of Islam's journey, Sheikh, what is one of the texts that the Nation of Islam has is called How to Eat to Live. Stop eating pork. Think about that. Pork was given to the enslaved African on the plantations when the slave master didn't want to give good food. Eat the hog, eat
yeah,
the chitlin, eat the
yeah,
gut. People still today in their jahiliyyah eat pig's feet, eat the chitlins, the gut of the pig. And even in the journey, even before Tawheed was proclaimed, the nation was saying, stop eating pork. Don't smoke cigarettes. Dress up well. Protect your women. Is that not what our dean would want us to do? And that was a part of his journey of being a speaker, a presenter, of what he was able to do. And what we can learn from him is his fire and his willingness to call out the inequities that were taking place because of racial discrimination. He called a spade a spade. He said, listen, the white man is tricking you.
yeah,
The white man is tricking you. And he said it in such fire that at a time, you have to think in 1955, a young black boy named Emmett Till, he
uh-huh.
goes down to Mississippi and allegedly whistles at a white girl and he's killed. This is a 13-year-old
Just
kid,
for
just
whistling,
for whistling at a white girl. So you have to think about what it now means to have a 6'4" black man standing with, he was for many of us the embodiment of masculinity. What it
yeah,
means to be a man, to not be afraid, to not scratch if you don't itch, to feel like you can speak without a fear. If you read his autobiography, you can see he knows he's getting ready to die. He feels as though because of the falling out he has with the Nation of Islam, he's made aware of some of Mr. Muhammad's shortcomings and begins to speak about it. So there's this split that occurs when the nation puts him out.
yeah,
And it's the qadr of Allah, because what's the first thing he does when he's put out? He makes Hajj.
wow.
As soon as he's put out in March of 64, he says, I'm going to go travel. And not only does he make Hajj, Sheikh, he travels throughout the Arab and Muslim world. He meets with world leaders.
So his Hajj actually transformed his worldview.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Seen
sir.
Muslim from all
Yes,
races,
sir.
worship together, shifted the rhetoric from exclusivity to universality.
One human.
Like one
Yeah.
human. And I think
Yes.
I his Malcolm X represent evolution. His
Yes.
Hajj transformed, his thought process, and he
Yeah.
was able to influence a lot.
Yeah.
I can remember when I was around 16, 17. I was in Egypt then, and there was this young African brother from Mali, and he was so, I'll say, obsessed
My
with
brother.
Malcolm X, dressed like him, carried like
Subhanallah.
him, and he would read all these books. And well, I get to know about Malcolm X at that tender
Mhm.
age. Like I
Mhm.
was now being a student, and then I know who Malcolm X is
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
And I was in 2004.
MashaAllah.
Yeah, around then.
Yeah.
Oh, 1994, sorry.
Wow.
1994 to 2000.
Wow, Sheikh, you look good.
1994.
Look at you.
1994.
Yeah.
I'm 47.
Allah.
So I left Guyana. I went to Egypt when I was like 16 years of age, and that I met most of my friends were from Africa. And here is it, I'm meeting this brother from Mali. They were there way before me, and I learned about Timbuktu and
King
before,
Mansa
yeah,
Musa. The richest
Mansa
man in the
Musa,
world is not
yeah,
Jeff Bezos, is
yeah,
not Elon Musk, it's an African, King Mansa Musa.
yeah.
Changed the gold currency on his Hajj. It's powerful, brother.
But coming back to that was
Yeah.
basically this youngster from Africa uh, that was so impressed with Malcolm X, and I'm sure that he wasn't from the West, and that's the impact
Well,
that
see,
Malcolm X had even to the African
he
kids.
was intentional of connecting the Pan-African struggle. You look at what is now the African Union. It was originally the OAU, the Organization of African Unity, based in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And because of Malcolm's travels, he said, I got to make an organization like that back here. So before he left, right, he was establishing the Quran and Sunni Islamic tradition of Muslim Mosque Incorporated. But then he said, listen, we need the OAAU, the Organization of Afro-American Unity, to connect with our brothers, because he saw in the world of the Cold War, Soviet Union, United States tension, that what's happening in
Yeah.
Mississippi is what's happening in the Congo
Oh.
with Patrice
Oh, they're
Lumumba.
similar.
Yeah, what's happening, the oppression of black bodies in the United States and this colonial exploitation of black people in the United States is what's happening in the Belgian Congo. And how the African who was colonized by the Belgian and King Leopold, and the heinous terror he did to black people, that if they didn't make enough rubber, he would cut their arms
Oh
off,
my God.
all documented. He saw that the rise of a Lumumba who spoke vehemently against colonial exploitation led to his martyrdom. And he saw what was happening in Vietnam, right? So he was, and before he was martyred, it's interesting to note this, Sheikh, that Malcolm and Martin were coming together, and they were both going to take the United States to the World Court and charge it for genocide. And they were really working on seeing that, listen, there's an interlocking world system of injustices that are oppressing us. That's racial, it's class, it's a lot of elements. And Malcolm, again, he was pioneering Pan-African thought, not since, I'm a big fan of William W.E.B. Du Bois as well, who died in Ghana in 1963, but they were Pan-Africanists who saw the unity of the Pan-African struggle important. So as Malcolm traveled the world, while he was in Africa, he actually crossed paths with Muhammad Ali while they were on their travels together. And he was a big mentor of Muhammad Ali. Again, born
Yes.
Cassius Clay in Louisville, Kentucky,
Yeah.
in the South, where black men and women are hanged and lynched
Yeah.
for just speaking out allegedly against white injustices. And after Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali wins the 1960 Olympic gold medal in Rome,
Yes.
he comes back to his diner in Louisville, Kentucky, and he wants a hamburger, and they say, we don't serve Negroes. Well, he says, well, I don't eat Negroes. I want a hamburger. So, he takes his Olympic gold medal famously and throws it in the river, because he's like, I'm serving this country, and this country won't even acknowledge me.
Yeah.
And after he beat Sonny Liston, he
Felt belittled.
belittled
Yeah.
because of the jahiliyyah of racial supremacist thinking. And we have to resist that shit.
And despite of all those struggles, like Muhammad Ali, not only Muhammad Ali, but also Malcolm X,
Yes, sir.
the name synonymous to justice.
Yes, sir.
And that is embedded in our faith.
Deen is a
The
just.
Prophet
Mhm.
Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, we were taught that from him that the greatest form of jihad is kalimat al-haq amam sultan and jahir.
In front of that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like the truthful word in front of the tyrant.
That's
And
right.
if we are people that claim faith
Mm.
and we're not able to stand up,
Mm.
against the tyranny and
Yeah.
racism, our community is divided based on racism
Sure.
today. And as we are talking about Malcolm X and others and the struggles of our African American brothers, like today, when we look at what's happening on the street,
SubhanAllah.
like people are treated differently based on they're targeted based
Racial
on the
profiling, brother.
racial
Yeah.
profiling. And it's sad. And this is where individuals like yourself and like me
Inshallah. Yes,
having
sir.
these discussions and standing up, not only discussions, but when we recognize this is happening or it's happening in our backyard, we must be able to stand up and say no.
No, sir. Dr. King famously said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And we have to see that it's beautiful to make our salat. We need to make sure we have our zikr and not tasawwuf. But if we see injustice that's occurring, we cannot be aloof. We can't be so caught up in, gotta do my, there's injustice that's happening. We have to be willing to resist that zulm, that oppression. And as you said, being a Musa, going to the Farun, speaking to the tyrant, the Abu Jahils and those ignorant, forces, that's a part of our deen.
Yeah.
We're called to enjoin good and forbid evil.
Yeah.
That is a part of the mandate. It
Yeah.
is. So some of us have, and I know our audience is of all walks of life, but to our Muslim brothers and sisters, that is a part of this deen al-haq. It is a requirement, it is obligatory, I would say, far in some circumstances, to really make sure that we're a part of the vanguard. Will there rise amongst you, right? A nation that enjoins good and forbids evil. That's what we're called to do.
And as we're talking about African American, the contribution and their Islam, just imagine that those slaves that were taken and they came to this part of the world as slaves, that they hold on to their faith, they preserve their faith, and that is a blessing from God.
Sheikh.
The preservation
Sheikh.
of it's our identity. Sheikh. Can
I
you
want-
speak a little
yeah,
bit about
I want everyone, and they get a chance, because it's interesting to note that during the transatlantic slave trade, and I'm just getting back before I I got back to you, I was in Alabama. I was at the Montgomery Equal Justice Initiative in the Legacy Museum that speaks about specifically mass incarceration
Yeah.
and its connection to Jim Crow, lynching, and then the actual
Yeah.
plantation slavery that took place. And Sheikh, do you know that more people of African ancestry were brought to Brazil
To
than
Brazil.
America? And I want our audience to look up what's called the Ramadan Revolt.
The Ramadan
The
revolt.
Ramadan Revolt was an insurrection led by African Muslims in Brazil. So there's
Wow.
something to be said about the Muslim understanding of I'm not a servant of anyone but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I'm not meant to be a slave but to anyone but Rabbil Alameen. And that fervor gave the Muslims, the African Muslims of Brazil, when I say it, it gives me a certain chill down my spine
Wow.
to know that that is a part of our inheritance, our legacy of being Muslims. We are a people who resist injustice. And if we see it, right, we are called to. If we can't change it with our hand, we speak out against it.
Yeah.
We can't speak out against it. We should at least detest it in our heart. That's the weakest of man. So we have a real calling to do more than that. We have the First Amendment. We got the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. We got all these protections under these laws of these United States. What is our excuse when we see people being abducted, taken from their livelihood simply because of the perception of their skin not being of a certain hue that society said it should be? Where's our faith? Where are the Muslim leaders? Will the Muslim leaders please stand up? Will we actually not just make, as we need to, the prayer, the leading, but as I see you, Sheikh, out in the community, speaking to law enforcement, interfacing with the people, doing the community advocacy work. That's how they see that the Muslims are not aloof. And I think that's what's happened. Many of our brothers and sisters who came to this nation after 1965,
Yeah.
they came here after the Immigration Reform Act. They started out in African-American masjids, but once they've gotten enough of a cohort of, we have enough people from the subcontinent or enough people from Turkey, they branch out and make their own and have left those historically under marginalized communities. The Islamic Center I'm at, almost every other masjid on Long Island started where we were. Once a few, but enough came, we go and branch out and build our own. And we had some issues with our plumbing recently. We had issues, our wudu area. So we're not, alhamdulillah, for everything. But if we're one ummah, one part of the body's hurt, then the whole body has ailment.
Yes,
We can't see
I totally
ourselves
agree.
as
We can't see
yeah.
ourselves, like, as communities, and maybe we will talk a little bit about that because that's concerning as
Yeah.
well for me as a spiritual leader. Should be concerning for everyone.
Right.
The thing is that our African brothers and sisters that were taken as slaves here, they came with faith.
Faith.
They came with faith. They came with Islam. Efforts were made to snatch that away from them. And that is why we see that there's a large percentage of the African Americans, and that's their choice. I mean, but I know that slavery played an important role in basically stripping them from that religious and
Right.
spiritual identity.
Right.
What advice do you have as a professor,
No.
as a doctor, as an intellectual, as a spiritual person? What advice do you have to the African American community, and particularly to the young people today concerning that?
I would say, in the words of Marcus Garvey, that a tree without its roots is dead, and know that the roots of the tree of the African American experience in these United States, Islam is a part of that base. There are examples of African enslaved Muslims being told to recite, for instance, the Lord's Prayer or Psalms 23, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, right, which is a Christian liturgy, but they would quietly, subtly, when the person thought that they were writing a Christian prayer, were actually writing Al-Fatiha. And they didn't know that, though.
Yeah.
Through fugitive means, keeping Islam. So it's like, what is the excuse?
Islam was like private for them,
Privately,
private them.
fugitive, on the auction block, quietly calling the adhan, eating, while having very little funds, but still finding ways to give sadaqah and zakat. So what I would say to the Afro-American community, to persons who are interested just in the history of a people who, in the face of slavery, 400 years of white supremacy and legacy that is still codified in law, do your research. It was Malcolm X who said, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. Well, we need knowledge. We need that we need that knowledge. And if you study those who came before us, you'll see that they struggled hard to keep this religion for us. And it is something that has been bequeathed to us, whether we know it or not. You know how many people are walking around with Muslim names? The beauty of giving your child a good name, even if you don't have Islam and totally understood yet, your father, he named you Kareem.
Kareem, subhanAllah.
SubhanAllah, like my son Jibreel, like you have a name, be a steward of your name. You walking around, like, do you realize your name is not
who they are,
yeah, like know who you are and know the names that have been given to you and study
what it represents.
and what it represents. Steward it well, right? And take honor in that. So I would say study, and really do that deep dive.
And also, I think it's important for them to know what some of our African American Muslim brothers are doing here to
Hmm.
transform this very society that
Yes,
we live
sir.
in. Like you have today, you have a lot of African American Muslim continue shaping the prison
Yes,
chaplaincies,
sir.
doing a lot of work,
Yes, sir.
trying to rehabilitate
Yes, sir.
individuals and working there.
Yeah,
This is something many people don't have the courageousness and the faith to go and do. And in addition to this, there's scholarship, the civil rights advocacy,
that's
and
right.
also the interfaith work that they do,
That's right.
right?
Right.
So you're seeing them integrally involved, and that
Yeah.
comes down back to what we were talking, that I appeal to our Muslim community in general here in New
Hmm.
York and the United States. This notion of segregating ourselves based on this is a Guyanese masjid, this is a
Right.
Caribbean masjid, this is an African American masjid, this is a Turkish masjid, this is a Bosnian masjid, this is a Pakistani masjid. It's not sending the strong
No,
message.
sir.
And also, despite our religion advocates community, that as you said, you need something, we're here. We should be
That's
here,
right.
right? We're
As
brothers.
you've
Uh,
modeled beautifully
yeah,
for us, Sheikh.
yes,
I
sir.
know that
You know,
certainly.
like,
I can
and
call on
I
you
firmly,
and you'll
I'm
be there.
convinced.
Yeah.
This is something. You know, it's here.
Mm.
It's coming from here, and we want to help the African. I
Yeah.
want to help the African American
Right.
community as an imam. That if there is anything we can do for your community,
SubhanAllah.
we are here to help with our educational resources. If it means to help raise finances as
Mhm.
well, to rehab, to have programs, whatever it is, we're here to
And
help
and
the
to
little
stand
bit,
with
the
and
little to
that we
stand with. Yeah,
yeah, if it
whatever
just
little that
means
we can do, we're here. We have to show that togetherness. And I really appreciate that you leave your work and everything for us
uh,
to have this discussion and for us to have this chat. And you know, I think our 30 minutes are up for this episode. But in a nutshell, can we leave something meaningful for our listeners and our viewers? I would want to say before I ask you
mhm.
that we cannot shy away from this fact that African American Muslims played an integral role
Yes.
here in the structuring
Mm.
and the development of the United States of America. And they still play an important role. And that contribution should not be sidelined.
No, sir.
We should honor those who have worked towards giving the Muslim a voice here
Mhm.
when they had no voice,
Mhm.
despite that they may have some aqidah that is not, you know, aligned to the Sunni,
Mhm.
but from that blossoms something very
Right.
beautiful. And I think it's important for us to recognize that and recognize the work that African Americans are actually
Just
doing.
in a very succinct, concise way, I'll echo that sentiment and ask our viewers to study, to learn, and to, as you've said, acknowledge that Islam did not get here when perhaps our uncles or aunts and family did. Know that there's a long history of persons who did what they could to with the tools they had. When you know better, you do better.
Yeah,
Now we know better. Now that community we're in, we are aware of the Quran and Sunnah al-Islam. We're going forward. So be in community. Stand with us and let's go forward, feasibility. Establish what's good, forbid what's wrong. And anytime, Sheikh, you need anything from me, I'm a phone call away. And I certainly appreciate you having the opportunity for a platform like this to bring on different speakers. Interfaith dialogue is critical. We're not just the only, listen, there are many different walks of life on this earth, and we have to be willing to dialogue. We have to be
yeah,
willing to engage in the
yeah,
discourse. And
yeah,
I'm all for good interlocutors and people who want to share. That's your perspective, or here's mine.
yeah.
And I don't have to, there's no compulsion in this.
That's
So we can only
exactly.
just be in dialogue and engage.
Yes,
So
exactly.
thank you for engaging with me, my brother. And inshallah, the audience members and those who come and watch this found our discourse fruitful. Any error that faults my own, any good old praises due to Allah.
So, same thing. And thank you so much. Jazakallah khair.
Amen.
It's like, yeah.
Jazakallah.
Inshallah.